Well, welcome in to My Dogs Are Barking on MPW Digital. I am Landon, and we're here for our Wednesday weekday show. And very, very excited. We have Barrett Sallee joining us, host of College Football Smothered and Covered. He is a guy. He came on one of our very first episodes on My Dogs Are Barking. And Barrett, man, how are you feeling, man? We are really chugging through the season, and got college football playoff standings coming out soon, man.
Yeah, it's weird. I actually was talking about this on my show the other day, how it feels like the season has just absolutely blown by. And then also, I look back when I was in Ireland covering Florida State, Georgia Tech. That seems like it was years ago. So it is funny how sort of college football season works. It kind of goes by real quick, but you remember a lot of the great moments. So yeah, it's the best sport in the world, man. And this season is certainly proof of that. It's been a lot of fun.
It has. It's been an absolutely wild season. Wild season. Um, we think about the SEC championship race. Currently, Texas A&M sits atop of the standings, which is something I certainly did not think was possible at the beginning of the season, having Mike Elko come in. And then we have Georgia and Ole Miss this weekend, huge game. LSU and Texas suffered their first loss in the SEC. Who's going to end up winning the SEC championship overall?
Well, I think it's going to be Texas A&M who gets there. Beyond that, I hope that lawyers looked over the SEC tiebreaker scenario because it has to be rock solid. I think you might have teams, multiple teams that are 2-loss teams, and that's it. I think Texas A&M can afford a loss. I think you look at their schedule; it's a lot easier than everybody else. Not to say that Auburn and South Carolina aren't getting better; they are, but still. Everybody else has a tough schedule too. Certainly, I think harder than that. But to me, if I had to guess right now, I would say it's Texas A&M and probably Georgia, just because I think Georgia is in a situation where if they are a one-loss team, they're not going to have to worry about a tiebreaker. I think if they fall somewhere else along the way, Ole Miss or Florida this weekend or wherever, then we could be in a really messy situation. But if I had to bet right now, and I was going to Tunica or Biloxi or wherever you guys can gamble in that state, I would put money on Texas A&M and Georgia.
Do you have a feel on when it comes to the actual playoff from these teams? And there's a lot of good teams at the top. There's some not so good teams at the bottom. AKA, welcome to My Dogs Are Barking podcast here. But
y'all will be all right. Just keep Lebby around. Y'all will be all right. It's a mulligan year.
It is. He at least gets one. We're gonna get to Mississippi State in just a little bit. But when it comes to the actual playoff, who would you say, if you had to bet today? A&M, I assume, would be one of them. Who would be the rest of the teams that would make the playoff that are from the SEC?
Yeah, it's interesting because the landscape of the season has sort of evolved in a very bizarre way. I think it depends on the ACC, to be honest with you. Clemson has gotten a lot better. Miami is Miami. I think SMU is going to run the table, and even if they don't win the tiebreaker and get to the ACC championship game, that's almost better because I think they'll get in too. I think there's a real possibility the ACC gets 3 teams in. But on the flip side, I don't know what's going to happen in the Big Ten, right? We got a big game this weekend with Ohio State and Penn State. If Penn State wins, I mean, it's going to be hard for Ohio State to make the Big Ten championship game. And then, we don't know what will happen. I think they'll get in, but then that sort of dominoes all the way down because they could beat Indiana, right? So you have a lot of dominoes that could fall in the Big Ten, which I think would directly correlate with what happens in the SEC and sort of to an extent the Big 12 too, although I think the Big 12 is much more likely to beat itself up and only get 1 or 2 in. But if I had to guess right now, the SEC is probably going to get 4. I said 5 preseason. I think the way, we've sort of evolved this year, that 4 is far more likely than anything else. And I would say if it's not 4, then 3 is much more likely than 5. I think a big team to watch out for in the SEC or 4 SEC teams, I should say, is Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's really good. I think they've gotten a lot better since the Northern Illinois loss. I went and saw them against Georgia Tech, and I tell you, that is the best boring team I've ever seen. They just go about their business. They don't do anything sexy, but they get the job done, and they do it with a quarterback in Riley Leonard, who I think was hamstrung the first couple of weeks of the season, and then they let him loose in week 3. So if you're an SEC team that's sort of on the brink and on that bubble, Notre Dame's going to have a lot to say, and I think that's a bad thing, because I think Notre Dame right now is one of the better teams in the country that, in my mind, will probably get a home playoff game.
When you think about the SEC, people have written off Alabama fairly quick. I mean, obviously they're not the same team they have been. LSU loses to A&M, and I know people are just so in the moment, man. Of, well, there goes the season. In 2 weeks, I believe it is. Those teams face off. Yeah, everyone should be gone. In 2 weeks, those teams face off, and one of those teams might be likely to win out the rest of the season and end up in the playoff. If you had to choose between those two, who would you say at the moment? Would you ride with LSU, or does Bama still have something left?
I'd ride with LSU. I think they sort of got caught up in the moment with Marcel Reed, and I think the offensive line struggled with the crowd noise at Kyle Field. This one's in Death Valley, obviously going to help. The problem with Alabama all year is the lack of discipline. Now against Missouri, that changed, and obviously they have the bye week now to sort of build off of that. But this is Death Valley, and it's Death Valley at night. And, we've seen Alabama, like on the road against Tennessee, 15 penalties, including some really, really dumb ones. I think it was 18 that were actually called, and then 15 that were actually assessed. I just don't trust Alabama. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they focused on the small things. And, I said this, Landon, and this was just absolutely bizarre after the Tennessee game, when Kalen DeBoer said, yeah, we're going to have to focus on the little things, like getting to meetings on time. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell? Like, this is Alabama. Nick Saban would murder somebody for being late to a meeting unless they had a doctor's note or something like that. So I think that sort of speaks to the problem that has existed all year, and that's they're just not disciplined. And the leaders, the guys who have been around, who I think Kalen DeBoer were counting on to sort of take over that leadership role, really haven't been there, with the exception of Jalen Milroe. I mean, we saw Malachi Moore kick a football in the waning moments of the Vanderbilt game. That would never happen. Like that, he would be suspended by Nick Saban. Seriously, he would be suspended by Nick Saban. You saw Kendrick Law throwing a punch at the end of the Tennessee game when, like, you could have gotten the ball back. It's just stupid things like that. Just it's just their identity. And so, LSU with Garrett Nussmeier, I think it was just sort of a thing where he got caught up in the moment. Not a lot. Some of those were his fault. Some of them weren't. I think the offensive line was more to blame than Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, he's not a bad quarterback. He had a bad game. LSU will be fine. Nussmeier's been on it all season long, and it's a remarkably difficult environment. So I don't know, man. Sometimes I get. I mean, I can't imagine someone like you, but like, I get so tired of the immediate reaction of, oh, this guy's just terrible. And I mean, I know it's a part of it, but goodness, does it not drive you nuts after a while?
Yeah, it does. I know Mississippi State folks sometimes think I'm a hot take artist too. But for a lot of us, myself included, we'll have hot takes when, like, we're being honest about it, right? Like, if I believe Jimbo Fisher sucks, I'm going to tell you Jimbo Fisher sucks, right? And I told Texas A&M folks that the day that he got hired, if I think Mississippi State's overrated, I'm going to tell you that Mississippi State's over. But there are people who force it, in not only the podcast world, but in the writing world. I think you can probably cast aspersions on who, but it sells, it clicks, it gets clicks. I'm okay with getting clicks. Obviously, it's our job, but being honest about it is something that I try to do. Even though when people disagree, they call me a hot take artist too. It's just the nature of the beast,
of course.
Right?
Well, and to be fair, yeah, of course, you get called out, especially like, and if you end up being wrong, you'll never hear the end of it. But if you end up being right, no one will ever say anything about it.
Well, here's the thing, though. I love being wrong. And I get to say that I'm being wrong. Like, we're all idiots sometimes, right? It's fun to call yourself an idiot.
Yeah, for some reason, my wife just she loves that word and calling me that as well. So that just seems to happen often. No, and to your credit, when it comes to Mississippi State, you have actually, the past 2 seasons, been completely right. Last year, man, people were coming at you for saying that State's not going to get. I think 4.5 was the win total, or maybe five. No, maybe 5.5.
I think it was five and
And
a
you
half.
took, yeah, and you took the under on that, and man, they lit you up like crazy. And you
Yeah.
were right. You were right. And this season is somehow even worse than that, which I want to transition into. Mississippi State offensively over the past couple of weeks versus really difficult competition on the road at Texas, on the road at Georgia, and having A&M at home. Offensively, Michael Van Buren as a true freshman, there's a lot of good things to see.
Yeah.
Defensively, Mississippi State is nearly 1,000 yards worse than the next closest team in the SEC on total defense. It's really
Jeez.
bad. Barrett, is there a positive to take out of this season for Mississippi State that is historically one of the worst they've ever had, especially defensively?
Yeah, you got the quarterback of the future. I think that's the biggest thing is, you weren't expecting this situation to develop, obviously. You thought Blake Shapen was going to be the guy, and Blake Shapen's good. Don't get me wrong. But is Mississippi State better off now? I think, yeah. The production isn't really what I'm talking about. It's the fact that you have a vision now, right? Jeff Lebby can point to this offense and say that's what I want to do. Like that's it. And I think it can. I think it's made. I mean, you tell me though. I think that the Mississippi State fans, the ones that I've talked to, seem excited about that. So I think that's the biggest thing. And look, I mean, I said this before the season. I was like, Mississippi State fans don't expect anything. Like, just don't expect anything. Go in with not say like low expectations. Don't have any, right? Because Lebby's new at this, new SEC, no divisions, NIL structure that really wasn't there beforehand. Like, all this stuff really after Mike Leach passed away is you've sort of been swimming, upstream, right? Let Lebby cook. I know in this day and age, everybody wants sort of instant gratification, but for Mississippi State, that means that's sort of not the way to approach it, because if you're Georgia, if you're a top tier team, if you're a top half team, if you're, a really prestigious team, or you're just a, top half in the power four. Yeah. You want to win immediately. I get it. Mississippi State is not that. And I know they hate to hear it, but Mississippi State is not that. So let Lebby have 3-4 years like we used to 20 years ago. Because if you just keep churning through, you're not going to get any better. Right? It's same, like perfect example. Even the best teams, the best programs have this issue. Look at Florida. Meyer retires, Muschamp, McElwain, Mullen, and now with Napier, and he might even get fired. It's like y'all be a little patient. Like, don't. I know it's a dirty word for football programs to be patient, but especially a team like Mississippi State, especially in an evolving world of college football, just chill out. Just let him do his thing and, have the quarterback of the future. And yeah, the defense is terrible, but the one thing that Lebby does, I think, better than folks I'm not saying Mississippi State folks, I'm saying outsiders. He can structure an NIL program. He did a good job at Oklahoma doing that, right? So let him do it. And he can make Mississippi State a destination for transfers. And if that happens, that's perfectly fine. And I think that's what Mississippi State actually needs to be.
Yeah, and last year as we finish up here, offensively, he's brought in at the wide receiver position some players that, in terms of Mississippi State's not had a receiver drafted since 1996. So the players that have been brought in are something that State has not seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about expectations, after the Toledo game, I mentioned, because they were just so deflated after such a big loss. And if you guys hear any barking, there's like 4 dogs outside of my door right now. I apologize. But there was kind of a thought of expectations when it comes to, like, say a husband and wife. Husband all week's been thinking about Friday night. He's going to do nothing but sit at home and play video games. He's been thinking about it all week. The wife on Friday night's been thinking, maybe he'll take me out. Maybe we'll do this. And then you arrive at Friday night and the expectations are separate. And that's when conflict happens, because this person expected this and this person expected this, but this is what ended up happening. I think Mississippi State fans have to set their expectations on being competitive in a rebuild year, which they have versus Georgia and Texas. And then just take spots where you are reminded this is a rebuild. Giving a 58 points to Arkansas and Taylor Green, remember,
Not
This is a
ideal.
rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely not. And we finish up with Barrett Sallee. And Barrett, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, Barrett was one of our very first episodes last year when like myself and my mom were like the only subscribers on this on this show, and my wife as well. We'll throw her in there. And so he was so kind to give us some time, and we've grown since then. We're so excited to be a part of the MPW Digital Network, and we're always excited to be able to talk to Barrett Sallee. So Barrett, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Landon. Thanks for having me.